increase the public's understanding of major policy issues through education and advocacy. And membership in the League is open to all of those of voting age. The League is nonpartisan and does not endorse political parties or candidates for this or any other election. So before we begin, I'd like to say thank you. First and foremost, to our Republican candidates, Mr. Chris Bruno and
Thank you.
and Mr. Michael Scott Lemon. And let me just say, we are happy, I mean really happy to have you here today. Thank you. We appreciate not only your being here, but all of the hard work that you've gone through to get this far in this campaign. So we're grateful to you, as well as to your family, your friends, and your supporters who have enabled you to serve your community in this way. Thanks so much. Let's give them another round of applause. Next, we would like to thank Chesapeake College. I'm sorry, I had one other. Congressman Andy Harris was invited, but he was unable to attend due to previously scheduled commitments, but he was invited. Thank you to Chesapeake College, our host. Not only is Chesapeake a well-respected educational institution, it's also a wonderful gathering place for the community to experience music and art and theater and all kinds of other cultural, educational, and civic activities like this. Thank you, Michelle, Rob, and Sabrina. I'm not sure where they all are, but thank you. They've been a great help to us in pulling this together. Thank you to our amazing Midshore media partners who help us publicize and are providing coverage of this event. First, from WHCP, a great place to be, founder Mike Starling, news director Jim Brady, and operations and production director Doug Schutz. From the Star Democrat, executive editor Jim Johnson and reporter Veronica Fernandez Alberto. From the Spy newspaper, our favorite Spy, published and executive editor Dave Wheeland. Thank you to all of our ladies from the Three Shore Leagues who have worked so hard to bring this together. And that includes Liz Hammond and her members from Queen Anne's County. Ladies, take a bow. Barb Fluke and Jackie Adams and their members, especially Cece Trainer from Kent County. And Glenna Heckathorn and I, and our marvelous Midshore members from Caroline, Dorchester, and Talbot counties. So last but not least, we would like to thank all of you for being here, because if it weren't for you, this would not be happening. There would be no reason for it to happen. Seeing you brings to mind the words of Thomas Jefferson. We do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. Thank you for being part of the majority who participates today. And so without further ado, let me introduce our co-president, Glenna Heckathorn, who will be our moderator today. Thank you, Glenna.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is I have these little cards in my hand, and you're going to draw for who goes first. Number 1 goes first in opening statements. Number 2 goes first in closing statements, and we'll ask you to switch who goes first in answering each of the questions. So, gentlemen. There you go. Who is number 1?
Number one.
Okay. All right, before we get started here, thank you. I would like to say my name is Glenna Heckathorn. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Midshore. I'm pleased to serve as your moderator. And on behalf of the League, I want to welcome everybody who's here. This is a forum for the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives from District 1. We will use the League of Women's Voters format to guide the forum. I'll begin by asking prepared questions, and we'll leave time for questions submitted by the audience. We ask that you hold all applause until the forum is finished. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give opening remarks, 2 minutes to respond to each question, and 2 minutes to give closing remarks. Our timekeeper, Karen, who's sitting in the front here, will give you a signal when you have 30 seconds to go. You will see that sign, and then when you have completed your 2 minutes, you'll see the stop sign. The ladies of the league are also passing out index cards and will collect your written questions, which they will give to our screeners. Please word your questions in a general way so that all candidates can respond to them. Any questions that are directed to only one candidate will not be asked. So you can't ask, when did you stop beating your wife? The League of Women Voters screeners will group your questions into categories of a similar nature and provide the moderator with representative questions to ask. The purpose of this is to avoid duplicate questions and personal remarks, and to assure that topics of greatest interest are addressed within the time that we've got. Before the forum began, the candidates drew a number, and they will answer questions in the order given. One more thing. I would like us to use tonight's debate as a way to educate those of us who are listening. So I'm going to ask the candidates to not only address the questions that we ask you, but please give us some background so that we get some insight and some education on the issues. So without further ado, we'll turn to candidate Lemon for your opening speech.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Michael Lemon, and I'd like to start with a quote from Thomas Jefferson myself. When the government fears the people, there is liberty, and when people fear the government, there is tyranny. I believe this is still true today. Our government doesn't fear us, so they end up serving its own needs rather than the needs of the people. Andy Harris has voted to allow wiretaps on a whim, violating the Fourth Amendment. The government is too busy sending billions to Ukraine and around the world to stop and help the bridges that collapse, help the fires that catch, and help the chemical explosions in East Palestine. Every day, our people are suffering, and they often have to choose, do I fill up on gas, or do I have to pay my rent? These are impossible times where we're giving people impossible decisions, but it doesn't have to be like this, so we cannot continue down this path. Because despite all of this, I still believe in the American dream. If I am chosen as your voice, I will make sure the government's priorities are to put American first. So Americans pay their taxes every day, and those tax monies go to Americans first, and then we can help the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bruno, your opening remarks.
So I wanted to give you a little background on myself and perhaps why I'm qualified to represent you as your congressman in the Maryland's 1st Congressional District. First of all, my military service, I enlisted in the Army in 1978, stayed on active duty until 1989. From there, I did some time in the reserves. Life took over, got married, children, and decided to dedicate myself to a civilian career. I got into the building industry thereafter and started building new homes, sold new homes, and well, honestly, it was a disaster. So I learned about business failure, but of course, failure leads to success. 1999, I got into the industry I'm in now. Was fortunate enough to meet a Harvard MBA businessman who taught me business and has given me the basis for my success today in business. I was really enjoying that lifestyle. I was enjoying living the American dream, but it was last year when I finally got fed up and hearing what's going on, what's not happening with our representation. Look, we're talking today about our congressman, your congressman. We're talking about replacing the person who's not properly representing us. That's what we're here about So just talking to the gentleman before the forum began, that's what we're talking about. This is a job interview. I'm here to take your questions today, answer them to the best of my ability, based on my experience. And on May 14th, we'll see how I did on my job interview. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question will go to Mr. Lemon. Last night, the House passed 4 bills in a $95 billion foreign aid package brought by House Speaker Mike Johnson. They include $60 billion in aid to Ukraine, $17 billion in offensive and defensive weapons for Israel, and paired with just over $9 billion in humanitarian aid for Gaza and elsewhere. Let's start with Ukraine. What is the importance of the war in Ukraine to the United States, and should the U.S. continue to provide aid to Ukraine? And I think I misspoke. I think Mr. Bruno should go first here because you
No,
went
that's fine.
first for the opening comment. Okay?
Proceed. My position on foreign spending is pretty simple. And let's use Ukraine and any of these entities, these countries that were going to be funded are going to be funded. The bill is passed. First of all, let's talk about what's happening in Ukraine is certainly a push by the Russians. It's a well-known fact. Vladimir Putin's intention is to restore the USSR to what it used to be by taking over Eastern Europe. That's a given fact. We know that's what his objective is. And the concern of that is from the European Union. Those are the people who are going to be directly affected by it should Vladimir Putin be successful in taking over Eastern Europe. So they're being affected by it. So the question I simply say is, why are we funding to protect them? It's their borders. We need to support them in the ways that we can support them, but monetarily we can't do those as a country. The European Union has an economy that's equivalent to the United States of America. You can check these things out. They have an economy of $27 trillion. It's equivalent to the United States of America. The European Union, who needs protection from the invasion of Putin into Ukraine and the eventual invasion, if he's successful, into Eastern Europe, into the Eastern European countries, they can stop it. They can borrow. Why are we borrowing money and sending it? Then the European Union can do that. They have like I said, they have the equivalent ability to borrow money out there and provide for their own protection. So, again, universally, that's the way I feel about sending money overseas because we're just borrowing. We've got to stop that as a nation. We can't afford it any longer.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
I do not support giving Ukraine any more money. Now, there's nothing against Ukraine. Ukraine is a country. It's got a corrupt government just like everywhere else, but they're people at the end of the day, and I understand that. However, we're not just giving them money. We're giving them money we don't have. We're making debt. We're writing them a check when our bank account's in the negative. We're currently at over $37 trillion of debt, and we're still just printing the money like it's payday. It's so easy for them to give money to Ukraine, but it's so hard for them to give money to Americans. Americans who, by the way, pay their taxes and pay into the system, they're the first ones to get left behind. We hear all about the news about Ukraine, Gaza, Taiwan. When was the last time y'all heard about East Palestine, Maui, the Key Bridge? American people still have needs, and when we get left out, whenever there's a disaster, it really just shows that they care more about those foreign countries than they do hardworking, honest Americans. And it's for that reason while Chris and I are here today, because Andy Harris, he is one who's continuously voted for these things to send your money away, where not only is the amount sent just unimaginable, the amount is often tracked not at all. They just lost $1 billion. And it's unaccounted for. So at the end of the day, where can you say that money went? I would rather spend 10 times that amount on Americans, because at least I know it's doing good, it's being tracked, and it's helping people, rather than going into some foreign oligarch's pocket. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question has to do with Israel. Should the United States continue providing military aid to Israel? Should there be any stipulations on that aid? And what is your stance on the proposed two-state solution? Mr. Lemon, you get to go first on this question.
Okay. Now, Israel is a country that is our ally. And you know what? I'm happy to help them. However, we cannot support Israel and Hamas. When we send them money, we send money to Israel as well. We're just throwing money at the fire and watching it all burn. For that reason, I would much gladly accept to send no money to Israel and stop funding Hamas. And when it comes to telling Israel on what to do, Israel is a sovereign nation. They were attacked. They have every right to go after Hamas. Who are we to tell them they need to have a ceasefire? So for that reason, we need to let them do what they have to do. Now, when it comes with Iran, we have the issues to deal with there because we need to make sure the conflict does not grow. We need to keep it between Israel and Hamas and not drag us into a third world war.
Thank you.
What was the last part of the question?
What do you think about the proposed two-state solution?
I'll be honest, I have some thoughts on that. I am not the most well-read person when it comes to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. However, I can say I'm up here running today not as a representative of Israel, but I'm up here running as a representative for Maryland's 1st Congressional District.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
As I stated previously, I'm in great opposition to us borrowing money and sending it to other countries. I just don't get that anymore. We've got to stop. And I look at, I'm a business guy. I'm always analyzing the numbers. So I look at these things and I say, okay, well, what are the numbers? And okay, Israel is 26 in the world when it comes to their economies and GDP. So they got a great bond rating. It was downgraded just a little bit as a result of the ongoing conflict that began there, but they're still capable of borrowing money and selling their bonds and providing for their defense, the defense of their nation. Why are we doing that? And again, it's going out and helping people who don't need help. They're perfectly capable of this. They have great weapon systems. They have a well-trained defense force, well-trained pilots. These people are more than capable, but they've proven to take care of themselves. Why are we sending money to them that, quite honestly, I think they're perfectly capable of taking care of themselves? So far as this two-state solution, this situation in Israel and the Palestinians has been going on with these people for thousands of years. Nobody's resolved that issue. I can, in any of my memories back to any president since as an adult, and anybody who's tried to resolve the conflict between the Arab states and the Israelis, it's been going on for decades. Nobody's come up with a simple solution to resolve that. So again, my greatest point of support our allies, yes, but we've got to stop funding.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to you again, Mr. Bruno. As a consequence of the House vote on foreign aid, House Speaker Mike Johnson may be recalled. How would you vote on a measure to oust the Speaker?
I don't know that I understand enough of the processes down there to make a decision on whether Mike Johnson should be ousted as a result of this. The bill was not sponsored by Mike Johnson. It was sponsored by two other Republicans whose names I don't recall off the top of my head. They were from the Midwest. It went through the Appropriations Committee, one of the committees that set it up by our current congressman, and it ended up in the House, and Mike Johnson supported it. Whether he should be ousted as a result of it, quite honestly, anybody who was in favor of it should be ousted, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. We've got to stop this crazy spending. His leadership was good at the outset. I believe that he was well intentioned, but this juggernaut of this craziness of this spending and this fight that is ongoing down in Washington D.C. with spending, I think the gentleman is over his head, just like a lot of folks are there, trying to stop this spending. So should he be ousted? What are we going to get as a result? That we ousted Kevin McCarthy last year when he made a deal with Joe Biden to reduce to take the ceiling off the debt limit. So now the federal government has a credit card without a credit limit on it, and they ousted him. And we bring in Mike Johnson. Who's going to be next? I don't think the problem is Mike Johnson. The problem is incumbents. The problem is career politicians. All they want to do is spend, 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 tax, 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 spend, spend, spend. When's it going to stop?
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
All right. Well, let me give you all a little bit of backstory on this because, like Chris said, we used to have Kevin McCarthy as speaker, but when he was elected in, there was a caveat. You had to have certain promises that you were going to fulfill. He broke every single one of those promises. So what did they do? They had a vote and they removed him. They brought in Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson, again, said he was going to do this. He was going to fight for the border. He wasn't going to give money to Ukraine. The very fact that we've passed a Ukraine bill and not a border bill is more than enough reason Mike Johnson should be removed from speaker. Yes, it's going to cause chaos. Yes, it's going to be unpleasant, but I would rather keep removing every speaker of the House until we get one that fights for Americans.
Thank you. Let's turn to another subject. First will be Mr. Lemon. What should be the federal role in regulating abortion in the United States? Would you introduce or support federal legislation to set limits on or ban abortion in the United States?
All right. So recently, last year, Roe versus Wade was overturned. And with that, it took the power from the federal government and it gave it to the states. So while I myself am very pro-life, I agree with leaving it with the states due to the fact abortion is a tough issue. There are cases that I personally know of where 6 months in, a fetus is growing a heart on the outside. The baby is most likely going to die. The parents were faced with an impossible decision. They chose to abort it due to the fact that the baby probably would have died. There are circumstances like that where I believe by leaving it to the states, the American people will have a much more informed view and have a voice to say what they actually want. Because before it was overturned, the law of the land was this. If I want an abortion at 9 months, I can get it. Now, most people who are pro-life, they, at terms of viability around 20 to 30 weeks, they know that's a baby. They know that baby can be delivered safely and taken care of. But I would much rather have it where we kick it to the states so that way the people of Maryland aren't given their choices from other states. They're given it from the people. The voters have a choice to choose how they want it. And yes, it may not align with my personal views of being pro-life, but it's much more important that we don't have 9-month abortion federally mandated.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
I think the pro-life position in this matter, so far as the government being involved in matters such as this, I don't think the federal or state government should be involved in this. These are matters of individual choice out there so far as people who have to deal with these things. As Michael gave an example of a child and who's evolving with a heart outside their body. These other situations, rape, incest, and so forth. These are decisions individuals need to make. I don't know where the basis comes for the government to get involved in these things. I'm not quite sure it's constitutional that the government gets involved in these things. Yeah, there's wrongs that are done out there that we need to correct through laws and so forth. But yeah, I always took this position, and to be candid with you, that pro-life, with the exception being incest, rape, and when it's the mother's life is in danger. And I still agree to the first two. The third one, again, that's a choice. Now you got to make a choice between the mother's life or the child's life. It gets very complicated. And I think these are very personal matters. Yes, I think a fetus is viable based on what I've read. It's 6 weeks. I think there's a heartbeat. I'm not an expert on those things, but gosh, the government's got their hands and fingers in so many things in this country. I just don't believe the government can adequately address the matter of abortion and things that are so personal along those lines.
Thank you. There is currently bipartisan legislation that is pending on border security, but has not been brought to the floor for a vote. what is your opinion about whether that legislation should be brought forth? And would you vote in favor of it, Mr. Bruno?
I have a very simple solution for so many things. It comes from that old document called the Constitution. If you go to my website, you'll see these quotes in there. I was called out on this a little while ago at an event I attended, and the person said, I quoted from the Constitution, the language that says where we have the authority under the Congress to protect the borders from this country from invasion. And somebody accused me of using draconian language. I said, well, I just copied and pasted from the thing called the Constitution. The Congress has the authority right now, without any further legislation. That document ratified by this country in 1789 gives them the authority to put the militia on the border and stop the invasion right now. Why we keep on having to say more legislation, more legislation. My favorite example to answer that question is this. So let's say they pass this wonderful bill, says no more immigration in the country. Everybody stop coming to America. So everybody from Guatemala, stay home. Everybody from El Salvador, stay home. Everybody in Venezuela, stay home. How many people are going to read that legislation in Venezuela? How many people are going to know that the Congress just passed a bill? You can't come to the United States anymore. They're not going to read that. They're going to keep on coming. We got to shut it down. We need to protect the borders of the country. Legislation is not going to change these people coming to the borders. We need to protect them, and we have the authority under the Constitution to do it. And we have immigration laws for people that want to come to this country legitimately, to come into this country and enjoy the freedoms that we do. So more legislation is not the answer. Let's use the tools we have in hand to start making a difference and protect the borders of this country.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
Now, before I begin, I have one quick question. That bill you're referring to, is that the one that had a caveat in there that allowed 5,000 illegal immigrants in a day, the bipartisan one?
Don't know the answer to that question, and this is where you can educate us.
Okay, so there was a bill recently that was dubbed bipartisan, but it was only a border name in name alone. It had a caveat saying 5,000 illegal immigrants can come across a day, any day, every single day. I remember, if the math is right, that's roughly 2.5 million a year, I believe. And that was just a terrible bill. So I 100% would not be on board for that bill. However, there are a few steps we can take. First and foremost, when they impeached Mayorkas, the people whose job it is to secure the border are clearly not doing their job, and they need to be held accountable. 100%, I would vote impeachment every day of the week for him. I would vote not just for him, but for his secretary and his secretary, and down the line until change happens. As for when it comes to our laws already on the books, yes, we have laws already on the books that aren't followed. However, Trump had a remain in Mexico policy. If you came in and you claimed asylum, you were to wait in Mexico for your case. Right now, without it, you come in, you're given a court date 7 years later, and you're free to go wherever you want. So I would codify Trump's remain in Mexico policy. So anyone coming to a point of entry has to claim asylum there, they wait in Mexico for the case, and their case is heard. But anyone who travels not through a point of entry, just running across the Rio Grande, well, put them on the line for deportation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Mr. Lemon. What is your position on gun control, and specifically a national gun registry?
I'm against a gun registry. Most legal gun owners never commit a crime. In fact, there was a study done a few years ago. I believe the number was 0.5% of permitted gun holders who apply for a concealed carry permit would actually commit crimes. The number of, when it comes to gun crime, 67% are done with illegally acquired guns. So if they are already breaking the law in acquiring the gun, having a registry would not change that at all. All this is doing is punishing legal gun owners for acts that are committed by people who illegally acquire it. In the same way, it would be punishing people who have a driver's license for drunk drivers. So for that reason, I am against a registration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bruno?
I'm glad the question came up because I answered this, rather, we responded to an inquiry through League of Women Voters, the 401, and we copied and pasted some draft material that incorrectly stated my position on Second Amendment rights. So it was brought up to me the other day by Jamie Wink, and because he knows that I'm not what was stated in there. So the website has now is correct. It's not where there's no opposition to the Second Amendment right to bear arms. There was a discussion about gun registration as a methodology for somehow curbing violence, and we were wordsmithing in it. It got discombobulated. So I apologize for that misinformation. I'm not opposed to the Second Amendment right to bear arms. I believe every American should have the right to bear arms. I'm not in favor of gun registration. I have a very, very simple position on guns. It was something that I read a few years back, and that's this. It's like if you misspell a word, it's like blaming it on the pencil. You misspelled the word. It's like blaming the gun crime on the gun is a myth. It's the individual who has the gun. There are laws in the books that prohibit certain people from having guns, and I agree with that. The people who have been convicted of these violent crimes should not be in possession of them. But that should not abridge the rights of individuals to be able to bear their own arms out there. So I oppose, in the context the question was asked, any mandatory gun registration out there, even though all the guns I own had to be registered. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question. The current Congress has been called the most dysfunctional in over 100 years. If you are elected, how will you work with your colleagues in both parties to foster cooperation and address the critical needs of the 1st Congressional District and the nation? Mr. Bruno.
I think they've been dysfunctional longer than that, but that's a personal opinion. To restore functionality is to restore back to the fundamentals. That's what they've all lost sight of. The fundamentals. We're out here to represent the people. 435 men and women are elected in this country to represent the individuals from their districts and to be their voice in Washington, D.C. And our elected officials are down there now spending 10 times more, making 10 times greater an effort to be reelected every 2 years or 6 years, whatever the case may be, versus serving the folks in the district. We want to bring some functionality to Congress. Follow the rules that were given to us under the Constitution. Article 1 spells out clearly the role of a senator and a congressman. There's no ambiguity there. We follow that, we can get back to the fundamentals. We can get rid of all of the cacophony of voices and noises that are distracting us from what we're supposed to be doing in Washington, D.C. There's so many things going on out there. Who knows what's right anymore? I've said this oftentimes when campaigning or sharing with folks on the campaign trail, this. Between state, local, and federal government, there's over 33 million laws on the books in this country to enforce 10 commandments. Think about that. That's hopelessly confusing. We got to get back to the fundamentals in this country if we're going to start making any changes, because these onerous laws are keeping us hopelessly confused on what direction to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
All right. Well, first of all, let me start with Congress is dysfunctional. No one is denying that. However, they need a reason to get their act together. Roughly 90% of Congress gets reelected every 2 years. This is where term limits come into play. Andy Harris has been elected 7 times. And let me tell you, I've been out here campaigning. I've met Chris at a ton of events. I've not seen hide nor hair of Andy Harris. So his strategy is my name's already on there. I'm an incumbent. I'm already going to win. If we keep reelecting incumbents, we can't expect it to change. Stealing the line from Chris, nothing changes if nothing changes. But it's like, in order for us to change Congress, we have to be willing to get out there and vote in primaries. The current longest senator right now is Senator Chuck Grassley. He's been serving for 42 years. Now, I am a grown adult. That's older than I am. He's been serving in Congress, he's been serving the Senate for longer than I've been alive. That cannot continue. I 100% agree with term limits. When we get down to the individual numbers, I'll have some flexibility there. But the fact is, when we have career politicians who are in there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we can't expect something to change if we keep reelecting them. So in order to fully change Congress, we have to elect fresh blood. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Lemon first. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden. Now, there's a ton of ways you can interpret that, but at the end of the day, he won. Were there issues in the 2020 election? Absolutely. Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that mail-in ballot was legal, even though it was against their state constitution. Those are the things that we need to flesh out. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden was sworn in on whatever day it was. It was like a January 21st. And he was president. Was it fair? I don't think there are no elections fair. But because at the end of the day, Chris and I are running against Andy Harris, and he's getting backed by $1 million from all these corporate PACs. Is it fair? No. But you know what? We're out here. We're going to fight. Just like I know a lot of people don't like him, but Donald Trump's out here fighting. The reason I believe Trump out of the other Republican candidates, he's the one fighting for American first. I remember Mike Pence was on stage one time. They asked him, how do you talk about Ukraine when Kensington and Philadelphia, the state there is just absolutely horrible. I'm going to watch my words because there's a lot I want to say about that. But let me just say, he's like, oh, I don't care about Philadelphia. That right there, we need politicians who put American first. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
The outcome of the election was the outcome of the election. Joe Biden's the president of the United States. The people voted. They spoke. Were there improprieties in the election? Were there irregularities in the election? Well, welcome to history. That's been happening since the beginning of time. There's no peculiarities there. So nowadays, and I think it started actually during the event with Bush Gore. I think that was the first time there was a lawsuit brought when there was some debate as to who was legitimately elected. And since then, it seems every time there's an election, there's a lawsuit being laid out there somewhere debating whether it was legitimate or not. I've no doubt that there are problems with the voter rolls. I've attended no less than a dozen voter integrity events. The rolls of the states are just an absolute mess. Dead people voting all the time. I went to an event. The woman told me she received 5 absentee ballots in the mail from her dead father and mother. The list goes on. She could vote 5 times. So, is there an issue? Yes, there is an issue. Do I accept the outcome of it? You have to. It's been certified. It's our process. It's our constitutional process. The elections have been certified by the 50 states and those who voted in the territories, and we accept it. Is it the outcome I wanted? No, but I accept it. And we have to accept it and move on from there and hope that we can somehow change the problem with voter integrity and the roles in the states out there. And that's, by the way, is the responsibility of the states. Constitutionally, the states have to fix that. The federal government cannot. The states must fix that.
Thank you. The next question is about Social Security, and it goes first to Mr. Bruno. What is the future of Social Security, and what legislation would you support to maintain the current program or to change it?
The future of the Social Security is the future of this country. You haven't gathered as much now. Look at things from a numbers perspective. Well, the government's a big business. 2.8 million people. It's the largest employer in the world. And I read Treasury reports every month. I read all various financial reports that are published by Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal about what's happening in this country. Social Security is a topic that comes up all the time. That's just one small sliver of an overall problem with the federal government and spending. Where it's going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, who knows? Where do we know we're going to be? If we keep on spending the way we are, we got more to concern ourselves with than Social Security. We've got more trust funds out there than that. We've got Social Security. We have the Medicare Trust Fund. We have the Highways Trust Fund. There's many other trust funds out there besides Social Security that are not properly funded. And to be candid with you, until you're on the inside in Washington, D.C., you're not going to get the real information on what's happening with those organizations. You're not going to find out what's happening with Social Security and Medicare and the other trust funds. They're on the books in the Treasury Department. You can download and you can look at the financial reports. But I will tell you, it's not hopelessly confusing. I think it's a hopeless mess on the balance sheet and their profit and loss. So Social Security, like all the government programs, is at risk if we continue to deficit spend the way we are in this country.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
I agree with Chris. Social Security is in trouble, just like the rest of this country. We are forced to pay Social Security. That's just a fact of the law of the land right now. So I, for one, will not cut Social Security for people who receive it, due to the simple fact you've paid into it your entire life. Since the day you start working at 18, or earlier for some of us, to the day you retire at 65, that is something you've paid into. So when they want to cut that and still send billions across, that gets me a little hot under the collar. For that reason, I would not cut Social Security for payments. However, those reports that Chris sent me, when you dive into the numbers, there's an awful lot of overhead, and I believe that could be fixed. I am more than willing to go in there and implement systems that make it function better, that make it much more cost effective. Because at the end of the day, you paid into it. You were not given a choice, so therefore, you should be rewarded for what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. How can Congress revitalize American industry, in your opinion?
First and foremost, energy independence. Right now, the price of gas is, I want to say, $3.69. $3.69 a gallon. Does anybody remember what it was less than 4 years ago? It was topping out at $1.99. We have an industry, we move things around. We ship stuff all across the country. That affects the bottom line of so many different things. Yes, in the future we may have nuclear, we may have solar, we may have wind, but the fact of the matter is right now in this day, we run on fossil fuels. So we need more, we just need more. Supply and demand, simple economic terms that most people understand. We increase drilling, we increase supply, the price will go down, and that gives breathing room into everything else. Because let me tell you, I talked to a lot of people during this campaign, and the time and time I get, the one thing that affects anybody else is I can't afford to live anymore. My rent's too high, my gas is too high, my food is too high. And these reasons are why we need to A, stop sending money abroad and focus it at home, as well as increase production, take out unnecessary regulations, make it easier to drill. Drilling, fracking, nuclear, those energies are going to sustain America from today, tomorrow, and in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
To Michael's point, energy independence, one of the focal points for economists has been to grow, not necessarily energy independence, but to grow the GDP in the energy sector is the first and foremost way they see to offset the effects of inflation and to grow our economy. Along those lines, if we begin to grow that industry, other industries will grow as a result of it because others will be invested back into the United States. But unfortunately, we're a debtor nation. Our markets are based on debt. I learned this fact many years ago in 08, 09, when we had the big economic downturn. I asked a friend of mine who was in the markets, why did this happen? And he said, the credit market's dried up. I said, what's that got to do with solvency? He said, we're not solvent anymore. We're in debt. All the markets of the world are based on indebtedness. Every country in the world is in debt. We are, every country in the world is in debt with the exception of one, country of Macau from the southeast region of China. The only reason they're not in debt because they're a casino nation. So they're just taking everybody else's money. They don't need to borrow anything. But every nation in the world is in debt. Our economies are based on debt. And the way they fuel the economy is through deficit spending and printing money. So stop getting back to better fiscal policies, energy independence, growing our GDP through energy independence is one way we can help bring back industry to this nation.
Thank you. It is pretty toasty up here under these lights.
It is.
I'm
It
going to
is.
take my jacket off, and I invite you gentlemen to
Thank
take
you.
I will.
yours off.
Well,
as well.
my mic's hooked up to it, so I can't.
Thank you.
But
I'm roasting.
Yes. Oh, you've got
yeah, we got the mic, so
microphones.
I'm just.
You have mics that you have to reposition.
I'm trying to fix that.
I'll suffer do it for the rest. I'll be fine.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so we're on to the next question. We're going to look at some state issues. Let me see, Mr. Bruno, you just finished that one, so you're first on the next one?
Okay.
Okay. What is your stance on federal funding for repair of the Key Bridge and waterway? Yes.
Oh, it's me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's you, because you just finished.
Okay,
last
very good.
one, So you get to start the next one.
Federal funding on the Key Bridge. It was so amazing that when that event took place. The first thing was, I think, come from the White House. Let's pay for it. The federal government, let's pay for the bridge. Well, this was what they call a property casualty claim covered under insurance. And that big old ship that ran into that bridge, they carry insurance for things like that. So why are we all immediately going to the government to pay for something where there's insurance to pay for that? There's clear liability. The picture's right there. Everybody saw the video. The ship ran into the bridge, it knocked it down. They have insurance for that purpose. If the government wants to step in and fund it pending the insurance claim being settled, and trust me, they have enough insurances to do this. I do fire and water restoration for a living. I know a little bit about insurance policies and the way they work. And I know a little bit about salvage operations based on my time in the military. As a diver, I did salvage operations like that. So I could bring all these little facts together and give you a pretty good insight as to that. But so far as the government jumping in and paying for something immediately when it's covered under insurance, ridiculous. And it's just another example of the absurdity of the government thinking they have the solution for everything when there's business solutions that can be developed out there to help to resolve these issues. The government is not the solution for everything that takes place.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
Well, thank God Chris went first on that one because insurance is not my strong boat. But you give me a Linux terminal, we got some issues. We got some stuff to do. But on that note, I don't know whether or not insurance would cover something like that. I have no idea on that. However, what I do know is we just signed a bill this Friday or Saturday, I can't remember which day it was, where we sent $80 billion to Ukraine. $80 billion, that would build that bridge countless times. How is it that when it comes to natural disasters like the fires in Maui, East Palestine, the Keystone Bridge, Americans are left high and dry, but as soon as they get that ring from Ukraine, they're just out there doling out billions of dollars. So for that, I would gladly pay for this bridge if it was necessary because it's vital to our general economy. It's such an important transport. Yes, we have the tunnel, but having the two lanes, it helps out, cuts down traffic and everything else. Imagine if the Bay Bridge was taken out. We would be up in a terrible situation. The simple fact is that bridge is a lifeline for us. So much goods and services travel back and forth across that bridge every single day. Which, by the way, that bridge, it needs a lot of work itself. We need to prevent what happened to the Keystone Bridge, prevent that from happening to the Bay Bridge. So for that reason, if, like Chris said, that we could pay for it and then have the insurance reimburse us, great. But at the end of the day, if there was no insurance, I would much rather pay for that bridge than to pay for Ukrainian generals to have vacation homes down in wherever they go.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's turn now to the quality of the environment. What is your stance on securing the quality of the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries? And Mr. Lemon.
Now, I don't know how many of y'all track this, but I know the crab population has been decreasing every year. Now, I'm not saying climate change is going to be the end of all of us, but what I am saying is I'd like to go out. I love to hike. I've hiked Shenandoah Valley countless times since I was a kid. I want a clean environment. I want a clean bay. I want to go out there, enjoy it, go to the beach, just soak up the sun. Having a clean environment not only helps our local fishermen, but it helps tourism and a bunch of other things. So yes, we should have some laws to keep it clean, but that doesn't mean we have to go full carbon tax and eliminate all carbon. We have to have a moderate balance, a certain dichotomy, in order to keep a clear head.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
Can you repeat that question back, please?
Sure. What's your stance on securing the quality of the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries?
This goes back to when I first started campaigning. It was brought to my attention I needed to read up on these matters, and it's a real challenging balance between the watermen, the farmers, and the recreational use of the bay, and the solution is complex. Is all I can say. We've got a problem with the Conowingo Dam being silted in. I read the backstory on it. That dam is 4,000 feet long, 110 feet high, and the nominal depth behind the dam is 10 feet because of being silted in since it was constructed in, I believe, 1932. And every time we get a large storm, that fills up so quickly, they need to open the gates, and all that junk behind there comes down and pollutes the bay. And I'm a boater. I walk across the river sometimes on the amount of junk that comes down there. Then that silt in turn covers oyster beds, and that affects that population. And then the silt gets onto the grasses, and then the fish can't lay their eggs on the grasses. I mean, this goes on and on and on and on. This is one of the most complex issues you could think of. Another example is we've got the farmers on the northern end of the eastern shore who produce the feed for the chickens on the southern end of the shore, and they're reducing the phosphorus they can use, and these guys down here have the runoff from the chickens. And I've talked to these people that are trying to manage this. I was like, this is. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to the question, and nobody else does either. It's just an ongoing challenge that someday, hopefully, we'll get together and find a solution. But I can tell you what, government's not the solution to it. I think it needs to be done, but on the civilian side, and bring technology in to come up with a final resolution.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Bruno first. Would you support legislation that would exempt seafood processors from the limit on H-2B visas? Currently, there's a cap of 66,000 visas per year.
I think it gets back to my earlier statement about immigration law. There's laws on the books to manage the folks coming to this country to provide the labor necessary for our various industries. I don't have a position one way or the other on limiting the number of folks coming in. I've had only one experience, not personally, but with a friend of mine who does lawn care, where he, as a result of the ongoing immigration issues, he couldn't start timely one year because they held up his folks who come back on a recurring basis to help him with lawn maintenance. So there are mechanisms in place. There is immigration laws in place. There's a way to manage the inflow and the outflow of people who come to this country on a seasonal basis to assist us in our industries. I would answer the question by saying this: I'll look at the matter. And I'll see if I can't come up with a better solution to make sure that our industries don't suffer by virtue of us doing something silly in the way of a regulation that keeps them from having the adequate resources they need to provide for their livelihoods and production of their businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
Well, like Chris, I'm also not too familiar with the specific issue. However, I can say this. I would be in favor of giving them an increase in the number of visas due to the simple fact these are people who are applying and immigrating and legally. When it comes to legal immigration, I'm 100% for it because people who stop, do it the proper way, great. When it comes to illegal immigration, they just hop across the thing and get $5,000 cards. So increasing the legal, yeah, I can see why that'd be good. And so if we increase legal immigration, great. At the end of the day, people who stop, who follow the law, I will welcome them any day with open arms.
Thank you. We're going to start asking questions now from our audience. Here is the first question from the audience for Mr. Lemon. How would you address the crime problem in our cities and suburbs?
Well, now there's a mix between state and federal. Now, while this does err more on the state side, it's gotten to a certain point where I believe federal needs to step up. During times of great stress, the president can send the National Guard in to help cities that are having extreme riots. So with extreme riots, yes, send the National Guard, bring in some order to get it to lower the temperature. As for everyday street crime, I believe the federal government needs to work with individual state governments to focus on the issues. Because at the end of the day, a high crime area will just increase the amount of poverty overall. So in order to combat that, we increase manufacturing. We make it so people have an easier shot to achieve the American dream. And when people feel safe, when they're well fed, crime will drop.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
I met with most of the sheriffs in the 1st Congressional District. The last one I met with was Mike Lewis, and he was probably the most, I guess, overt about things that are affecting their ability to enforce crime or to stop crime from occurring. And as he stated to me, the problem is within the Maryland legislature, and it seems that every session they're in, they make it so that they're more restrictive on what they can do with law enforcement. He gave me an example of the last law that came out that they passed. If there's a crime taking place where it's a robbery and it's daylight and they're putting goods that are stealing and into a vehicle and the vehicle's underway and they don't get there before the vehicle's underway, they're restricted on the way they can pull the vehicle over. And he went this litany of all these restrictions on law enforcement. I don't know if people know who Mike Lewis is, but I tell you, he's an icon in law enforcement. And he said, Chris, it's just making it so difficult for us to do our jobs because they pass he said the liberals are passing these laws to make law not illegal anymore. And it's making it difficult for them to enforce the laws as it's so restrictive. So that's on the local level. I don't know about the federal level. The only thing I hear coming out of the federal level is that they're onerous, that the Department of Justice is out of control, that the FBI is out of control. But the local level, I can tell you that matter needs to be addressed to the local legislature because they're passing the laws in Maryland that are affecting Maryland's 1st Congressional District, and they're the people need to be spoken to about the rise of crime.
Thank you. Our next question is about balancing the federal budget. What specific measures would you take to balance the budget? On the tax side, what taxes would you increase? On the spending side, which items would you cut? Mr. Bruno.
I don't believe that taxes and spending, well, let me rephrase that. If you could get Congress to agree to spending cuts and to balance the revenue coming in, you'd have a balanced budget. But they're not going to do it. It's the bottom line. I'm not fooling you and I'm not fooling myself. They're not going to do it. They have the complete and total authority to deficit spend all day long. Getting back to an earlier comment I made, The deal that McCarthy made with Biden took the cap off of deficit spending until January 3rd, 2025. The federal government right now has a credit card with no credit limit. Within 43 days of that happening, our deficit went up $1 trillion. Since the beginning of this fiscal year, starting in October, it's gone up by $1.7 trillion. They're not stopping. Raising taxes and saying you're going to cut spending is not going to do it. There's only one solution. You need a constitutional amendment that forces Congress to have a balanced budget. When the president presents the budget, that's what they approve. And furthermore, when are we going to have a budget? When are we going to have an actual spending bill that's passed? It's been 24 years since they've passed an actual budget down in Congress. I don't know if people are aware of that. It's been this ongoing continual resolution, this omnibus spending. It's completely out of control. Constitutional amendments to force, first of all, term limits. That'll, first of all, get people like me down there for limited periods of time. Secondarily, a constitutional amendment, force them to balance the budget. That's the only way you're going to bring it under control. Taxing and spending is not going to make the difference. They just won't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
Well, first and foremost, we could raise taxes all day and we would still be in debt. So the issue comes down to spending. We need to take our spending and take a step back and say, we just can't afford it anymore. Budgets start in the House. So when the House votes on a budget and they have the 4,000-page pork book filled with all kinds of spending, that cannot continue. Whether or not we have to get it down to like just a few things or even just a single item at once, I would do that. Because when you pass these giant budgets that they're given 30 minutes to read, that should be completely illegal. You can't expect a man to read and fully understand a financial budget in 30 minutes and then expect them to vote on it. Because they know, well, I might as well just vote yes, because I couldn't read that. How can you vote on a bill you didn't read? So in order to cut spending, we need to make sure these budgets are not stacking these 1,000-page omnibus bills and taken out line by line. As for taxes, ideally, I would like to lower taxes, but I know we're in a deficit. So, but I want to make sure, because at the end of the day, when you pay taxes, your money is going to the government. You need to have a say in it. And right now, Chris and I are up here because we believe we have an idea. Andy Harris, nowhere to be found. Thank you.
Well, on that note, this is a question about the incumbent in this position. What is your opinion of the incumbent's failure to keep his promise to serve 6 terms maximum and who is now running for his 8th term? Mr. Lemon.
Well, first of all, I myself did not know that he made that promise to run 6 terms. So that is news to me. On that note, it's up to us to be the term limits. Because until we get a constitutional amendment, we need to say, hey, you can't just not show up and expect to get voted in. So Dr. Harris has done some things. I mean, he's obviously ran and won 7 times. Okay, well, now he's got new blood. Now there's new blood in the race. And we need to show him that you can't just escape by your laurels. He was voted in on the Tea Party. Part of the core tenets of the Tea Party, they wanted limited government. Did he do that? No, he just voted for warrantless wiretaps. He wanted smaller government. Did he do that? Nope, just voted to give $80 billion to Ukraine. So at the end of the day, I think he's lost his way. So it's up to the people of the 1st District to show him we don't want that.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
I got a story to tell. I don't know if I can do it in 2 minutes. Last year, I sent an email to Congressman Harris. He had not declared his candidacy. I had. And I sent him a very nice email. It wasn't inflammatory. And I wanted to meet with him. I wanted to discuss my candidacy because I presumed he was not going to run again. He made that promise. He said he was only going to run for 6 terms. And in that same email, I thanked him for running for that 7th term because, see, there was nobody else running against him. And had he not done so, I gave him the benefit of the doubt that he was running for that 7th term, because otherwise we would have ended up with a Democrat as our congressperson representing us in this district. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I thanked him for it, congratulated him for it. Then I wanted to talk to him about my candidacy and how I could take on his conservative legacy. And I wish I printed that email out. I could read it back to you today, but it wasn't nice, the reply. And it basically said, I'm running again. And 2 weeks later, I went to another event, and he stood up there, and he hadn't declared yet. He hadn't gone down to the state of Maryland and registered like all of us had previously. And he stood up there, he said, I don't care what you say, I'm running for re-election. It was actually hubris, just defying the promises he made. Like, it's beyond just him making that statement in 2010 when he said he was only going to run for 6 terms. Not only that, he actually introduced a constitutional amendment for term limits and said, and then he blew that off. And then after that, he said, oh, I'm running now because the socialists are taking over. Well, that's true. But now we're here, myself and Michael Lemon, and there's new blood, new people, grassroots guys that can get down there and make a difference. So his term needs to be limited May 14th, 2024, by voting in a new candidate that's going to represent this district and start doing some work for us down there.
Thank you. The next question comes from our audience. Do you support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act? Please explain your position. Mr. Bruno.
John Lewis Voting Rights Act?
Yes.
I confess to be clueless as to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. What is that, from 1963 or 1954, or is it the one
No,
from?
I know it's recent.
What's that?
I know it's recent, but I don't know what it entails.
I confess to have no knowledge of it.
Okay. I'm going to say that both of our candidates pass on
Well,
this question.
I
Would you
can-
like to respond, Mr. Lemon?
I can just say one quick thing on that. Voting rights. Every single person in this room is legally allowed to vote, and your vote matters as much as the person to your left, and your vote matters as much as the person to the right. However, your voice can influence more voters than just your one single vote. You can be like, hey, I heard about this Chris Bruno guy. I hear he's really great. And you go through, and your voice becomes more than your vote. I have not seen a single person denied the right to vote other than felons. So I think we're already good. I think we have a voting right that works. Don't you, Chris?
I think it works great. Yeah. There's problems with voter integrity. We know this. I'm not a politician, so I can't make up answers to questions that I don't know the answer to. So I'll have to research that one, get a little more boned up, and I'll put on my Facebook page, and I'll let you all know what I think about that. You can log on there and see what my thoughts are on that. So somebody stumped me out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Mr. Lemon on this question, and you may have to educate me on this. Are you in favor of the U.S. signing the WHO, World Health Organization's pandemic treaty?
Oh, no. Now, I know the topic. I know a little bit about it. But due to the simple right, signing that treaty gives up our sovereignty. Now, while our response to the pandemic was not the greatest, lockdowns, constitutional violations were happening every single day. But by signing that treaty, it would force us to lock down whenever they say. And part of being American is being free. And I think it's high time the government remembers that.
Okay. Mr. Bruno?
Along those same lines, I'm opposed to any treaty that we would sign that would affect our sovereignty as a nation. We need to start looking more to ourselves here as a nation, and how we're going to manage things along those lines. And as Michael said, my opposition is there to these pandemic measures, the masking and all these things that were a violation of our constitutional rights out there. I'm opposed to anything that is a world order. That's one of my biggest fears I have in this country, where we're going, is the world orders that are coming along. They want a world currency, they want a world this and a world that. And that's probably getting a little biblical, but for other folks out there probably know where I'm coming from with that. So that's the direction we're going in. And so I'm opposed to anything that would make us part of any world order.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question. going to have to figure out what this means. How do we know you won't become part of the party's fringe? I'm assuming that the person who asked this question is asking whether or not they would associate with MAGA Republicans? Yes? No? How do you interpret that?
Fringe, like the lunatic fringe, maybe?
Okay.
No, I don't know how to interpret it. I think maybe the question is if I hope I'm not going to mischaracterize in my the interpretation of it, but how do you keep from changing once you become a congressman? I think everybody who runs for office as a congressman or senator, even president for that matter, gets in there with this utopian idea of how they're going to change things, and the next thing you know, they're out there drinking the Kool-Aid, or they're in the swamp, or one of the other terms they use to describe them. And I will tell you, my first fundraiser from last year in September, the thing that was most important to me when that event took place was the pastor from my church got up and prayed for me to make sure that I remembered why I'm here doing this. What are my motives for doing what I'm doing? I'm out here to represent the people. Don't get caught up in the minutia of what's happening in Washington, D.C. Be careful of the money. Be careful of the power. It'll distract you. It'll make you part of the wrong movement. Stick with your proper motives of why you're doing it. Stick with 3 terms, representing the people. Don't get caught up in PAC money. I've refused PAC money. I will not take it. I've signed that pledge as well. I won't get caught up in, and just a little finer point on that, the incumbent, getting back to that question from earlier, the raising of funds in the 1st Congressional District for the incumbent has been abysmal. And that's a direct reflection of people's feelings towards his leadership and what he's done as our representative. The majority of the money that the incumbent has raised to run the race has come from PACs outside the state of Maryland. People in the state do not support the incumbent, but you can get PAC money all day long to support whether it's our congressmen or others throughout the United States. That's how they're staying in office.
Thank you. Mr. Lemon?
So, like Chris said, the question is a little vague, so I'm going to try and interpret it with good faith. So, when it comes to the fringe of the party, I do see a divide in the Republican Party. You have the old guard and you have American First. I'm not going to mince corners and say anything. I am clearly American First because I want to fight for Americans. We can use Nikki Haley and Donald Trump as an example. Nikki Haley, 100%, just give money to war, take money from Boeing, and that's how you end up with planes that are missing bolts and doors flying off in the middle of the sky. Donald Trump, American First. He's out there cutting deals with the first auto workers union, securing manufacturing jobs to help our middle class. Every day of the week, I'm going to help Americans over anyone else. So if to you, fringe is someone who's American First, then I'm probably not your candidate. But if you want a candidate that's going to fight for America, check me out.
Okay, thank you. Are there critical issues facing the 1st Congressional District that could be but are not being addressed by Congress? And what do you think those issues are? And what would you do as a member of the House to address them? Mr. Lemon.
Basically, at the end of the day, there is so much when it comes down to how much the Americans, everyday Americans, feel inflation. And there's so many different ways to tackle this, but we must decide on a course. So if we want to lower inflation, it goes back. We bring back manufacturing. We increase energy production. We have to keep fighting for Americans. As for issues that aren't talked about, at the end of the day, I want kitchen table issues. Kitchen table issues are what keep us sane. Because when we get home, we have family, wives, children, parents, all these members of our family. They mean more to us than anything else. So that's why at the end of the day, I'm fighting for American families.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno?
When I started campaigning, I had a different perspective on this question, and it's evolved this way. Last year, I attended the Maryland Association of Counties, and I had the pleasure of meeting county executives and county councilmen and commissioners. And it was really fascinating to watch these folks in Ocean City, Maryland. And the most fascinating part was they're Democrats and Republicans both. And they're working together to achieve solutions for the citizens that they represent within their communities. And I came to realize in watching these folks, nobody blamed each other. The Republican didn't blame the Democrat for the sewer line not going far enough or vice versa, or water problems, road problems, the list goes on. They all work together in this symbiotic relationship to try to better lives for the citizens they represented. I realized that day the most important thing that your congressional representative can do, me representing you, is to be out there in front of your county executives, your county commissioners, and seeing what's happening in the community and hearing and supporting them in their efforts to better things in the community, and then say simply this: what can I do to help you better your job? What can I do at the federal level? Can I get rid of a regulation that's keeping you from moving forward on some silly EPA regulation that's stopping you from putting a road in or a sewer line? And is there something that I could do that's onerous that the federal government's doing? And so in looking at that relationship, that's what I believe the congressman can do at this level to help people. And beyond that is looking out for the rights. So for the federal government affecting the basic rights of the citizens within the first congressional district.
Thank you. Well, I think we have now exhausted all of the questions that our very smart audience members could think up. And so we will give each of you an opportunity to wrap up. I think, Mr. Lemon, did you go first?
I went first when it came to the opening statements, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Bruno gets to go first with his closing statement.
2 minutes.
You get 2 minutes.
I redid from what I had originally written this morning, that I practiced for 2 minutes. So I'll try to keep it under the 2 minutes. Look, I'm not a politician. I'm a business guy. I might not be politically correct in the way I address some things. Look, I identify with everybody I've talked to since I've been going around the first congressional district campaigning. It's been the time of my life. It really has. I've fallen in love with the Eastern Shore and the people here as well. So if I sound a little politically incorrect, well, I'm not a politician. I've got to make this point because I have made some few connections since I've been campaigning, and that is this. It was alluded to earlier that Congressman Harris is not here, who is actually candidate Harris, because in the challenged race, he is a candidate just like myself and Michael, and he should be here because this is about getting hired for a job. That's what you're looking at today, is who you're going to hire to do the job to represent you down there. Mr. Harris should be here today looking to see if he should be rehired for the job. Well, I found out 2 days ago the reason why he's not here is because the polls came in and said he's automatically going to get rehired. Just want to let you know that. And so he doesn't need to participate in debates or forums because the poll said it won't make a difference. He's going to be rehired for the job. Well, I disagree with that. So lastly, this morning, and what I haven't had a chance to share with you everything, but I'm going to share this real quick. I put 7 points on my Facebook page. Look under the issues. I put 7 bullet points in there of things I read that I fill my head with that I'm going to use to represent you in Congress. I want you to read. These are really, really important. These are truths that you need to read about our country, where we're going, whether it be fiscal policy, the list goes on. And just one last thing. Andy Harris said he's going to save America. And I clicked to try to find his plan on how he's going to save America. And it says page not found. Just want to share that with you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lemon?
Well, thank you all for coming out here tonight. Let me just say, these months campaigning, I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of great people. But at the end of the day, this is about your voice. You have listened to me and Chris here up here today. You've heard what we think. At the end of the day, you get to choose who you want to represent you in Congress. I've met with a wonderful lady, Marie Evans, and she told me one piece of advice that stuck in my head. Don't lose yourself. It's so easy to try to be who I think you want me to be. But at the end of the day, that ain't me. I am the man who I am, and I'm trying my best. I'm going to give you the most authentic, honest version of that man so you can see who he really is and what he really represents. Because these are not rehearsed talking points. These are how I really feel. And if this is how you want your congressman to feel, make your voice heard on May 14th.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank our audience tonight. I would like to thank our candidates for coming in and Chesapeake College. This has been very informative. Thank you so much. Can you stay around a little bit and chat
Sure,
with
yeah.
people in the
As
audience?
long as it's not on this stage.
I know, it's toasty up here.
It must be 120 degrees up here.
Right.
I gotta get rid of this hot mic. Before I get in trouble.
Oh, yeah, let me take this off. Hot mic, hot mic.